Hello, everybody. Welcome to Theology 101. Today, I will begin a new series on the book of James. Imagine you woke up and your older brother was Jesus. What if you got into a fight with him? Who do you think your parents are going to side with? Who do you think your parents' favorite child will be? I can't imagine how difficult it must have been to have God as your older brother. You can't ever live up to him. And you will get tired of hearing from your parents, well, Jesus would never talk back to us like that. Or Jesus would never punch the wall in anger for no reason. But that is exactly what James had to go through his entire life. We think it will be cool to have Jesus as your older brother, but it would actually be difficult. What would it take for you to believe that your older brother was God? The book of James is one of the most important books in the Bible. We will hear from a person who knew Jesus very well, but didn't believe he was God until a lot later in life. And in fact, the early church thought that the book of James was so important that they required all new believers to read this letter before any of Paul's letters. So what makes the book of James so important? Let's begin by looking at James. As I mentioned, James was a half-brother of Jesus. When Jesus returned to his hometown, people were amazed with his teaching but also mocked him this way. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, and Joseph, and Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. In other words, people were thinking, we know this guy. He isn't that special. He isn't a rabbi. He comes from a blue-collar family, and we know his brothers and sisters. Notice who is listed first among Jesus' siblings. James, the author of this letter. But James did not believe Jesus was God at this point. In fact, he thought Jesus was crazy. What would it take for you to believe that your brother is God? Later in Jesus' ministry, his brothers urged him to go to Jerusalem to make a name for himself. Notice that the Apostle John notes their motivation for pushing Jesus to Jerusalem, for not even his brothers believed in him. Wait a minute, James doesn't believe Jesus is God? Even though he saw miracles, even though he heard Jesus' teachings, and even though he wants Jesus to become famous, he didn't believe Jesus was God? How was that possible? Again, what would it take for you to believe that your brother is God? When we go to Jesus' crucifixion, do you remember who took Jesus' body and buried him? Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. Where was James? It was a family's responsibility to take care of a person's body, but we don't see James at the cross or visiting Jesus' tomb. He wasn't there because he was probably ashamed of Jesus, and he still didn't believe Jesus was God. However, we see a very different James in the book of Acts. In Acts chapter 1 verse 14, we see that James was there with the other apostles praying. Later in Acts chapter 15 verses 19 through 20, we see that James became one of the leaders of the Jerusalem church. The leaders were discussing on what to do with Gentiles who became Christians. They were debating on whether they should become circumcised or if they should just let them remain as Gentiles. After much debate, James stands up and gives a final verdict. Therefore, my judgment is that we should not trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to God, but should write to them to abstain from the things polluted by idols and from sexual immorality and from what has been strangled and from blood. I want you to notice something. James was just one of the many believers praying in Acts chapter 1, but here he is one of the leaders. But notice that once he declares his judgment on the situation, the issue was settled. Did you notice that nobody else challenged James at this point? What does this tell us? This tells us that James became not just one of the leaders of the Jerusalem church, but he was probably the leader of the Jerusalem church. In fact, Paul highlights James's authority as one of the pillars of the church. When James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given to me, they gave the right hand of fellowship to Barnabas and me, that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. According to church history, James was eventually martyred in 62 AD because of his faith in Jesus. And when James was about to get executed, he had a chance to recant everything about his brother, but James chose to die for Jesus. He didn't die for Jesus because he was his brother. He died for Jesus because he believed that he was God. What would it take for you to believe that your brother is God? So what changed James from a man who grew up with Jesus to a worshiper of Jesus? We see what changed in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 7. Paul talks about all the people Jesus appeared to after his resurrection, and Paul makes this note. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Jesus appeared specifically to his brother James before he appeared to his apostles. You see, when James saw his brother resurrect from the dead, everything changed for him. You know what it would take for you to believe your brother is God? If your brother resurrected from the dead. Now, knowing the background to James, let's look at why we should study the book of James. The book of James is considered the Proverbs of the New Testament. When you survey the book, James will go through many different areas of life that don't seem connected. But the way his letter is connected is around the idea of wisdom. wisdom. We see James's thesis or the climax of his letter in James chapter 3, verses 13 to 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. In his thesis, James contrasts two types of wisdom. There is an earthly wisdom and a heavenly wisdom. Earthly wisdom is information or advice you can get from anybody anywhere. But James says that there is a second type of wisdom. And look at how he describes this type of wisdom. Pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Now there's something interesting that James does in the Greek to describe heavenly wisdom as opposed to earthly wisdom. In the Greek, all the descriptions of earthly wisdom start with different letters to show the disorder that this wisdom creates. But look at the Greek word James uses to describe heavenly wisdom. Do you notice how all these words start with the letter E? Do you see the picture James paints? The wisdom you receive from this world will only cause disorder in your life. But the wisdom that comes from heaven, specifically from Christ, is orderly. In other words, it brings peace. So the reason why you should care about the book of James is because all of us have some disorder or conflict in our lives, right? And for James, the answer isn't a 10-step program. It isn't just to talk to people who are smart around you. The answer is to find wisdom that comes from God. And it is this wisdom that we will be studying in upcoming videos. Thank you to today's sponsor, All Reverence. They offer a free digital worship music app called Maskill. If you want to find out more, I'll leave some links below in the description box. Until next time, see you.